There are a lot of storylines to talk about in this year's playoffs, many of which I have already talked about plenty, and I'm sure there are going to be plenty more to come as well, because that's how it works. But one storyline I feel has gone a tad under the radar, mostly because it's more of a collection of different storylines, is how many young players are dominating the playoffs right now, and how significant that happening with this many players actually is. In this year's playoffs, Trae Young, Luka Doncic, DeAndre, and Ja Morant have all been nothing short of amazing. And there are other players as well who have been contributing in their own ways, but really I want to talk about these four guys who have elevated their games and really played on such a high scale at such a young age, because three of these guys are 22 and one of them is 21. But on top of these guys being standout and deserving credit for that, this has also made me think of something that NBA fans commonly do, which annoys me really often, which is they don't give a young player credit simply because it's too soon. Like, it's too early to say how impressive this is, so we're not going to give this player credit yet. So let's talk about why the future is now, old man. Which I know is ironic because everyone thinks I'm 30, but you get my point. Before I continue on with this video, about half of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you fall into that 50%, then please subscribe for daily playoff content. Also drop a like on this video, it is much appreciated, and subscribe to my second channel. And subscribe to my second channel. I am very nearly at 50K subscribers over there, and I would like to reach that milestone during the playoffs. I am doing daily, sometimes like 2 days ago I did 3 videos in one day. I'm just doing multiple videos over there covering whatever the hell happens in the playoffs. So if that is something that interests you, then go subscribe. Also check out Rusty recaps on audio platforms if you'd prefer to listen to it in a more podcast style. Now, before I go and give all of these players that I mentioned praise, I first have to acknowledge that these are 4 players that in some way or another I have doubted along the way of their career, whether it was before they were in the NBA or even after. Luka and Trae in a famously terrible take on my Twitter, one of the worst basketball takes of all time. That one, and then Ja Morant and DeAndre in a lot more recently, like the last 6 months recently. So, I mean, I don't have a point there. I just find it funny. Excuse you! Okay, it's fine. I appreciate it. Fuck was I talking about? Oh yeah, I don't have a point. I don't have a point to this. It's just funny to me. I mean, give me shit for it if you want, go for it. The Luka and Trae thing has already aged terribly. This is just making it even worse. But yeah, that's that. So first, let's talk about the most impressive player here, obviously, which is Luka. Now, he is obviously the least surprising guy out of this group because he was already a top 10 player in the league already as a 22-year-old. But he has dominated the playoffs as he did in his first year, and really it's no surprise. But when I made my video on whether or not Luka is a top 5 player in the NBA, which by the way, that video was more about the conversation than actually definitively saying that yes, he is, because I honestly don't know. In that video, I got multiple comments that suggested that, yeah, he's probably a top 5 talent, but we're not giving him that credit yet because it's too early, or he hasn't proven himself, which to me, first of all, yes, he has proven himself enough to me that he is a ridiculously good talent. But then second of all, like, if a guy's good, a guy's good. It's not more complicated than that. If a guy came into the NBA right now and was the best player in the league and like 40 games have passed, then he's the best player in the league. Maybe that's decided not to be true after some time passes and they get worse or whatever. But regardless, like, all you're doing is putting off a conversation based on someone else having longevity, which I get to an extent that you give the player who's been around longer more credit just because you've seen them do what they've done for longer, therefore it's more established in your brain. But don't just say Luka isn't top 5 because too early. Give an actual reason, because that's not one of them. Trae, I expected to be a bit worse in the playoffs, just simply because of the fact that he would not be getting to the free throw line as much, which he hasn't been, but he has scored more points because he's gone more to what he was in his first 2 years, which was less foul baity. As the engine of this Hawks offense against a top 5 defense, he is averaging 27 and 10 on 59% true shooting, with a difference of plus 19.8 in offensive rating when he's on the court versus off. Empty stats, my ass. I'm probably gonna make a video on that specific element of this. I just find it interesting. But Trey has been unbelievable as a distributor, as a scorer, everything across the board. He has taken a top 5 defense in the NBA and just completely picked them apart at every turn. Ja Morant was already playing great basketball at the end of the season, and especially in the play-in tournament. He put up 2 amazing performances in the play-in tournament. But more importantly is that after that, in the actual playoffs, he has continued to be fantastic, and even more fantastic than he already was. Though the Grizzlies are down 3-1, which maybe you'd use that to take some credit away, this is the 1-8 matchup, and while the Grizzlies have good depth in terms of like actual NBA players, the creating offense element of this team is pretty shaky often, so you got to give Ja that credit. In 4 games, he has averaged 31 points and 7.5 assists, with him putting up his best performance in Game 2, where he had 47 points and 7 assists. He has been a crazy good scorer, especially going to the basket. His feel for the game, which was already well established, has turned into an outright. I almost said alt-right. That's a very different thing. His feel for the game, which was already previously established, has turned into an outright great, like superstar caliber feel for the game element in these 4 games. His pace and control of the game is the reason why, despite the fact that the Grizzlies are down 3-1, all 4 of these games have been close, and that's because he has had control of the game, even if the Jazz have won in spite of that. DeAndre Ayton, I expected to play well if the Lakers did not mostly go to Anthony Davis at center, because I figured Andre Drummond in the pick and roll would be completely lost, and kind of has been the case. But I didn't think he'd go off quite to this extent. He has averaged 20 and 13.5 rebounds on fucking 80% from the field so far. I'd still like for him to shoot the ball more than 12 times per game. I'd still like to see him get some more self-creation, post-up specifically, but I'm not going to complain about that when you're shooting 80% on the 12 shots you are taking. And I also would say that, once again, as I mentioned in my DeAndre Ayton is a bit of a disappointment video, that it's more so the Suns not giving Ayton the opportunity than Ayton not trying, because he's been asked to be physical in this series, and he has done that wonderfully. Wasn't asked to do that as much early, and wasn't asked at all to post up, and still isn't. I think that's a part of his game that could be a big element of him and the Suns offense, but at the same time, they're in the playoffs in round 1 versus a fucking contender, so not the time to experiment. But regardless, this efficiency at the basket, the incredible rebounding against a team that is a very good rebounding team, obviously with AD and Andre Drummond, as well as the fact that he's been a good defensive player throughout the series, he's just been perfect for what Phoenix needs. I'd still like him to shoot more, but that's a development I think we can wait for next season. But just to summarize, we have a 21-year-old in Ja Morant, and then 3 22-year-olds here from the 2018 draft class, and all of them have played like top 20 players in the league in their first 4 or 5 games in the playoffs. And while I don't expect all these players to play at this level all the time, Trey is playing a little bit above his level. Luka, I do think, could average 35 points per game if he wanted to, but I doubt he would. I do think DeAndre Ayton can be a 20 and 13 big, but he also will have to be more aggressive. And Ja Morant, while I do think this is a sign of him taking the next step, 31 and 7 for an entire regular season is probably a tad bit extreme of a leap. But regardless, I think this is a positive sign for everyone across the board that they are ready to take the next step. Luka really not really him, because he was already on that level, but Trey taking the next step, Ayton taking the next step, and Ja Morant taking the next step. And I'm happy to have been wrong to some extent, some to an extreme, some a little bit, for all 4 of these players, because they're all fantastic. Ja Morant is electric and incredibly entertaining to watch. I'm loving watching DeAndre Ayton dominate the Lakers in the paint. Luka is like one of my top 5 players in the league at bare minimum. And Trae Young, while I'm sometimes annoyed by him, I've consistently, ever since he's been in the NBA, like second half of his rookie year, been thinking that he is underrated and underappreciated, and he's been proving that thus far. But you know, imagine thinking that Luka and Trey are top 5 prospects from their draft class. Couldn't be me. God, what the fuck was I thinking when I tweeted that? Anyways, shout out to Rudy for editing this video. Again, go check out my second channel if you have not already, trying to get that to 50K. But that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.